Check, check. I am live. It feels very bright. Like I need to sit back a little bit. I'm doing this alone for the first time, so excuse the not as filtered as I normally look. This is my webcam, so it's a little brighter. Also, really tired from dealing with all of this. So it is 7:30. Thank you all for joining my live. I did this for Hurricane Ian as well, and it was fun just to kind of talk to people and answer some questions about what it's like to be here. As I said in the description, I am not a meteorologist. I am not an emergency worker, so I will stay in my lane and not give advice about anything that is really important or comment too much on what's going to happen in the future. I'm happy to talk about what we're hearing down here versus what you guys may be hearing up there. But our local news people are very detailed. They're also very calm, and they just tell it how it is. And there's not a lot of freaking out or anything like that whenever you're watching the local news. Anybody who lives in Florida knows that Dennis Phillips of ABC Action News is our source for hurricane information, as well as Mike's weather page, who is a local person here who's been doing very wonderful weather updates for years and years and years. Between the two of them, that's what I use as my source pretty much all the time whenever I'm trying to figure out what's going on weather-wise. We had the 5 p.m. update. Obviously, a couple hours ago. I just got off the Dennis Phillips live, which is always from 7 to 7:30. So if you're interested in getting live feed from him, just check out his Facebook page, just Dennis Phillips, ABC Action News. And he does a lot of live things there. So just saw that. It is obviously up to a Category 5 again. The eye has reformed, and it is still coming to the west coast of Florida, which is not a surprise. We always knew that's where it was going to go. It was just a matter of where it actually hits. What we're being told is if it hits to the south of us here in Tampa, then the worst of the storm surge will be to the south of us, because that's the south end of the storm tends to be what pushes the water on. If we get the north end of the storm, because it hits to the south, then we will have a tremendous amount of rain and wind and things like that. So to start, I wanted to talk about the last hurricane a little bit, because that has been overshadowed now that Milton, which by the way, I mean, Milton sounds like such a nice man. I don't know why it doesn't seem like a very good name for a hurricane, but Hurricane Helene came through about 2 weeks ago, and it was a very strange storm for us here in Tampa. And it was very different for the people that were obviously got it as it went further along up in North Carolina and Tennessee and Georgia and everything. Here in Tampa, it was like the tale of two hurricanes. If you were affected by the surge, which I'll talk about in a second, it was devastating. If you were not affected by the surge, it was very underwhelming. It was downright sunny the day that Helene came in, because it wasn't really a huge rainmaker for us, and it didn't really have a lot of wind for us. There were definitely down tree branches and things like that. But in terms of what we're going to see with Milton, Helene was a walk in the park as far as rain and wind. Now, surge from Helene was the worst that we had ever seen in this area. And I think, the news rightfully started looking in the direction of the northern states, because down here in Tampa, what we got was the waterfront homes and homes that were close to the water got record surge. So a lot of my friends and people that I know in the area don't have houses anymore. If you lived on any of the beaches, you got 4 feet of water in your house. A lot of them did. And the same was true for Davis Islands, which has some of our most expensive real estate in the Tampa Bay area. And then along the West Shore corridor, which is, again, in Tampa, where a lot of really beautiful homes are. They got flooding there as well. And then the St. Pete side of the bay, Shore Acres, which notoriously has historically always flooded. Venetian Isles, which is right near Shore Acres, but has a lot of newer homes. A lot of those homes flooded. You had flooding all along I guess that would be the eastern side of Pinellas County. So we were still cleaning up from that. The cities and counties were in the process of getting all the debris off the road because everyone had to cut drywall out of their house. They had to get furniture out of their house. Everything was on the sides of the road. And the biggest projects that have had to happen over the last couple of days have been that they had to get the debris off the road because now with all the wind and rain from Milton, we have a huge possibility of all of that stuff flying around and causing more damage just because there's so much debris flying around. I mean, appliances, furniture, pieces of walls. I mean, it was everything. The fact that they got as much cleanup done over the past couple of days that they have is nothing short of a miracle. I cannot stress enough how much the city has been, the city of Tampa where I live, so I'm paying the most attention to that, but the same is true for St. Pete and the beaches. The amount of energy and effort and manpower that they have put into removing the debris from Helene has been extraordinary. So for any of you guys wondering, our cities, counties, and state, we are very prepared to deal with hurricanes and to clean up. The Rays Stadium, Tropicana Field, is currently set up as a staging area for linemen and people that will be going out after the storm to help restore power. We are expected to lose power all over the west coast of Florida. That will probably be the first things that we have to deal with. But we have all tried to prepare for that. One of the things as far as power is concerned, that is an interesting fact about the storm coming kind of later in the season is if we lose power, it's actually supposed to be a really nice weekend here. The storm is kind of taking everything out. And the highs this weekend are in the low 80s. So it's not like having a storm come through in July where when the storm comes, passes by, we're all dealing with 95-degree weather outside. It is actually going to be fairly nice this weekend. So if we lose power and we don't have air conditioning, we can open our windows and hopefully everyone will be somewhat comfortable. But we will see. But the cities and the counties and the state are prepping accordingly. From a state perspective, the state is used to dealing with hurricanes. And even though we don't get them in Tampa, or we haven't really had that many direct hits, obviously in 100 years, we haven't had a direct hit. The state itself is used to dealing with hurricanes throughout all of Florida. So it's not like this is new for them. It is really, really a strain on the resources, though, when you have a hurricane 2 weeks ago and then one right now that is going through such a big part of the state. It's pretty much just cutting straight through the state. We are expected to have hurricane winds throughout even the middle of the state into Orlando and things like that. So that is a brief update on what I've learned from the 5 o'clock update. I did an Instagram post the other day, and it is the most viral post I have ever done. It was regarding Apple iPhones and their use of the satellite if we lose cell service. It is only on newer iPhones, and you have to update it to iOS 18. Basically, what I've learned since I posted that was that if cell service is down, then your phone should automatically try to connect to satellite. It works only when you have a clear access to the satellite. So in a lot of cases, it's saying go outside. It's also saying that, if some people have been able to get it on in their house, but if you're in a really heavy wooded area, that it's not necessarily going to connect to the satellite. But kudos to Apple. And I believe I heard that Google Pixel has it too, or some sort of capability. But kudos to all of any cell phone manufacturer that is allowing for access to texting whenever we don't have our cell service, because once Wi-Fi goes down and once cell service goes down, it cuts everybody off and everybody's worried about you. We had one of my family members lives up in North Carolina. No one could get in touch with her for days because she didn't have any way to communicate with anybody. So if it works and we lose cell service and we are able to communicate with everybody via the satellite, that will be a huge benefit for all of us as far as getting information out. I believe it's just texting, so it's not like we're going to be able to post or anything like that. But I'm at least happy to have the ability to text and to receive texts. I do have a newer iPhone. So the other thing, we learned a lot of lessons from Hurricane Ian when it came through Fort Myers. I paid a lot of attention to what the people down there had said that they really needed. And one of the things that a lot of people had said that they were lacking was a radio. So I did actually buy one of these 2 years ago. It has a hand crank. It has batteries. I have charged it. It has solar and will connect to the radio. Also has a flashlight. It has emergency light, just about all the bells and whistles that you can get. So I'm hoping, oh, and a compass, even though I know exactly what direction I'm going anytime I'm in Tampa. David Evans, one of my clients that I have met, just commented, please tell me you're not in Tampa. Well, let's talk about that. I am still in Tampa. I am still in my house, as any of you can tell who watch my YouTube channel regularly. I am in my studio right now. I just don't have the normal equipment that I normally use, but I am still in Tampa, and I will tell you why. And this is one of the things I really wanted to talk about tonight, because it is perplexing to people why we don't evacuate. Mandatory evacuations are set by the county. Pinellas County has evacuation zones A, B, and C, and Hillsborough County is A and B. I'm not sure what Manatee and Sarasota are, but that's what they are. I think Pasco is A and B as well. If you are not in an evacuation zone and you don't want to leave, or you feel like your house is strong enough, then a lot of people choose to stay. And there's a couple of reasons why. This is not me saying anybody should stay. If anybody wants to leave, they should leave. It's a very dangerous storm. So, but one of the reasons why is that if all of us left, if every person on the West Coast left, because technically in the cone of uncertainty, it could go anywhere. It could be a direct hit to Sarasota or Bradenton or Venice or Fort Myers or Port Charlotte, or, it's not going to be in Naples. But if all of us left, then that would be millions of people evacuating at the same time. There is already a strain on resources as far as gas is concerned for people to get up I-75. There is a lack of hotels. The traffic on those roads is terrible. When people try to evacuate all at the same time. I had a lot of friends that left yesterday. They spent hours and hours in their car. Now they all made it to their destinations, which is fantastic. Some went to Atlanta. I think my mom is in Georgia, and then Tallahassee. A lot of people have gone to Orlando or to the other coast, just so they're not in the main part of the winds. The reason I didn't evacuate is because, one, I wasn't required to. And two, I have a newer house with hurricane strength windows. I also have a portable generator. If I lose power, I can at least have my refrigerator and fans and things like that. I would say, other than that, there's part of me, if I'm being completely honest, there's part of me that feels obligated to be here. And I have lived in Florida my whole life. I have sold this area my whole life. I didn't want to run from it. I feel safe where I am. And I hope that's true. I mean, that's all I can really say about it. I've done everything over the last 3 days that I can to prepare. Like I said, I have a generator. I have gas to fill that generator. I have every single light source I can possibly find. And there's a lot of people in my neighborhood that are also staying. So it's not like I'm alone. I will not be alone here. So it's, that's not an option. But more than anything, you have to assess your risk, because we all can't evacuate. It's just not possible for us all to evacuate. So a lot of times what people will do who live on the coast is they will actually just evacuate a little bit inland. I'll tell people, hey, just go to Wesley Chapel and, ride it out there, because the surge is scary and the wind is scary. And obviously none of us, want houses where our roofs are coming off or anything like that. But in general, if you just move inland out of the evacuation zones, then that's what they're telling you to do. They're not telling you have to go to another state. Now, I won't talk about too much about the fact that when everyone tries to get back at the same time, it creates a whole other problem. One of the things that happened with Ian in Fort Myers that was completely unexpected, at least from my perspective, was there was so much rain in the center of the state with Ian that we had rivers that overflowed and blocked off I-75. And I think it was like a day or two after Ian. If anyone remembers the timing of that, let me know. But it blocked off I-75 near Sarasota. And it shut down those roads. And people that were trying to get supplies into Fort Myers weren't able to because of the volume of rain that had gone into the rivers and had made the rivers overflow. So it's not just the hurricane and while it's going through, there's all sorts of other things that happen that you have to prepare for. So for me personally, I understand the risk that I'm taking by staying. I am prepared as much as I can for that risk. And I have enough people around to help if I need it, and I will have people here. So that's my choice. And I will keep you guys posted on all of that. As someone just said, we run from the water and we hide from the wind here in Florida. So, and basically what that means is if you're in an evacuation zone, that's typically because of surge risk. And so you have to run from that. You have to get out of there. Surge is so, so dangerous. And then hiding from the wind means if you're in a solid structure with impact windows, or if you put up your shutters and you're not in an evacuation zone, then that is hiding from the wind. So obviously none of us are going to go outside while it's coming through or anything like that. I am very bummed that it's coming through in the middle of the night, because it just makes it a little scarier in general when you can't really see what's going on. Because I have hurricane glass in my house, I don't have anything covering my windows. So I can actually see the trees and stuff like that. I will say where I live, there's a lot of, it's very compact. So I feel very protected from just the houses on the side of me and things like that. So I will absolutely do a follow-up video as soon as I can, just to make sure, that everybody knows that everything's fine here, and things like that. One of the things I wanted to talk about, because I just talked about evacuation zones, is if you are ever thinking about moving to Florida and you are doing your research, flood zones and evacuation zones are two different things. And a lot of times when you're buying and selling real estate, you're talking about flood zones because that has to do with the actual purchase of the house, whether you need flood insurance, whether you're required to have flood insurance from your insurance or from your bank. So people focus on flood zones, are you an A, a B, X, whatever. But evacuation zones are different, and those are different maps. We don't talk about evacuation zones really whenever we're buying and selling real estate, but they obviously correlate very closely. So if you're in a flood zone AE, then you're probably in an evacuation zone A, but they're not the same. So it's a really important thing to keep in mind if you're moving to Florida and say you're going to be renting or something like that. And you're like, oh, well, I'm going to live in an apartment complex, so I'm going to be 4 floors up. So I don't need to worry about evacuating because I'm not going to get a surge 4 floors up. Well, if you're in an evacuation zone, so say you're in like downtown Tampa or Davis Islands or Harbor Island or downtown St. Pete, and it's an evacuation zone, then they can shut off the power preemptively for your building because you are supposed to be evacuated. So it doesn't make it comfortable to be there, and the roads could be closed. So just because either you're not buying, so you're not paying attention to your flood zone, or you're, living in a high rise or whatever, pay attention to the evacuation zones if you are concerned about whether you're going to have to evacuate or not have to evacuate. There are differences. Give me 1 second. I'm going to have a sip of my drink. It's tequila. I'm not going to lie. It's been a long couple of days. I have water too, but Anyway, thanks, Dad. Dad said I was doing great. So that is a tip for me, from me as a real estate agent. If you were thinking about moving to Florida, now I know that seems kind of crazy right now. Like, oh yes, let's deal with hurricanes. It's going to be a rush of people moving to Florida. It does happen that people understand the risk. They still want to live here. This is something that we deal with in each individual city very few times a year, because it kind of disperses throughout the state. But we are just getting kind of a 1-2 punch here in Tampa. But in other times, it's been other parts of the state. Florida still, for the most part, has so many wonderful things about it. So there will still be people that will move here. So if you are moving here, I want to make sure that you understand flood zones and evacuation zones, the difference between the two, and to do your research on both before you move if you're concerned about it. So the other thing I want to talk about is the FEMA 50% rule, which is another weird rule that if you don't live here, or if you're going to move here and you don't have somebody educating you on this, you can lose a lot of money, and you can end up not getting what you actually want. So the 50% rule in the coastal areas of Florida means that if you want to improve your house, so say you buy a 1957 ranch on Indian Rocks Beach, and you're like, I'm just going to update it. I don't like the way it looks. I'm going to update it. Maybe add a second story, whatever you want to do. You are only able to update the value of that house 50%, less than 50%, just under 50% of the value of the structure, the current value of the structure. So if you buy a house on the beach for $800,000, I promise you, if it is an old house, most of the value that you are paying for is the land value, because waterfront land value, beach land value is very expensive, or has been. So the structure itself has a very, very different value. Say it's worth $200,000, then technically you are only allowed to improve that structure $100,000, which does not get you very far in renovations, or build-ons or anything like that. So a lot of people will come here and they will not be educated on what the 50% rule means. They will buy an older house because they will think, oh, this is the only one I can afford, I will update it. And then they get stuck with the 50% rule that will not allow them to get the proper permits in order to update their house if they're not following those correct rules that we have in place here. And the reason they do that is because they don't want people putting in a bunch of value into houses that are not built up to current code. We are now building houses a story above. So 12, 13 feet. I forget exactly what it is. If any of my friends are builders watching out there, please correct me. But if you're on the water, you are building up basically a whole floor, which, for the record, as far as I'm concerned, we should have been doing this whole time. It solves two problems. One, it puts your living space up high enough for most of these storms. Two, it gives you a giant basement below, which storage in Florida has always been an issue. People don't like the fact we obviously don't have basements here. So it will give you, in some cases, it's like a 10, 11 car garage underneath. Now, none of that stuff is insurable. That part of the house is not insurable. It is specifically built to be able to have water come in and drain and not affect where you're living. That's not to say people don't put things in there or build things out, but those are not insured spaces. So you have to be very, very careful. You will lose all that stuff. But for the most part, on most days that you're living in Florida, it just works as this amazing basement space for you to use storage, or if you have a lot of cars or anything like that. There are a lot of houses being built now that are being built like that. Some of my favorite houses out there. So look for that. And there were a lot of new construction codes over the past 10 years. Anything new that's on the water will have hurricane windows, hurricane impact windows, or shutters. They have to. It's required now. One of the things, we still have some time because the hurricane has slowed down a little bit. And so if you have not put your shutters up and you have shutters, you definitely want to put your shutters up. The hurricane company, if they are giving you, or the insurance company, if they are giving you a discount for having shutters, they are going to want you to have them up. That can be very, very tedious, especially on two-story homes, for anybody who doesn't have the equipment and ladders and things like that. So I fully recognize that that's a challenge, but neighbors do tend to come together to help neighbors whenever things like this are happening. Um, so yeah, that's the 50% rule. So if you're planning on moving here, please keep that in mind too. Again, it's not something that I think most people understand um, before they get here. And I also think that whatever you're renting, so again, say you're coming from New York and you want to rent down here and you see a house in Shore Acres in St. Pete and you're like, oh, this is affordable. This is oddly affordable. Well, there's probably a reason why it's oddly affordable, yet so close to downtown St. Pete and the Gandy Bridge and the beaches, because there does tend to be more of a risk of flood there. So checking out those evacuation zones, flood zones, even on rentals is important because you have stuff too. You don't need to lose all of your stuff. You don't need to be displaced. There are so many displaced people right now because of Helene. We had a huge run on rentals. I was showing some clients' houses last week, and they had a very specific price point in a very specific area that happens to be out of a flood zone in Pinellas County, which is kind of hard to find, although the north central part of Pinellas County doesn't tend to be in a flood zone. And they had 6 houses on like Wednesday that they wanted to see. By the time Saturday rolled around, there was only 3 that were available. The rest of them had gotten contracts, and some of them had been on the market for a long time. But what we saw was with Helene, a lot of people lost their homes. So they just decided to buy something else. Either they had the cash to do it, or they had the ability to, deal with their house that's being renovated, and they bought another house that's outside of a flood zone. It is so important to make sure that you're doing that research. And what might happen if more people lose their house is we are going to have even more shifting of residents. So obviously some people will just say, I'm done with Florida. I'm not going to stay here. I'm getting out. Other people will be renovating their houses and they need rentals. Other people will be selling their land. We have had a lot of builders not buying a ton of land. And I'm not talking about like the big builders up in the north because there's land up there. But areas like South Tampa, where lots are expensive here, they're super expensive. With all the interest rates being what they are, a lot of builders, and the price is not really going down too much. A lot of builders haven't really been able to purchase a lot of lots to build on in the next couple of years. So if you're thinking about like new construction in South Tampa, those are typically custom builds, or a lot of them are. Some of them are specs. But builders are buying those things, a year and a half, 2 years in advance. They're buying their lots, they're creating their lot inventory, and then they spec out the house, or they get somebody to, purchase the house and they build on it. It's a long process. So if we don't have builders buying lots now, then there's not going to be a lot of new construction in a year and a half from now. So I do believe that because of Helene and all of the flooding that happened there will be a lot more land available for builders to build on in the next couple of years. Now, keep in mind that they are going to be building to new construction code, to new elevations with new windows. And those price points are probably going to be more expensive just because the cost of building that is more expensive. It makes me very sad for the people that have lived in those homes for decades and never had any issues with flooding. But it came very quick with Helene. It was right after dark, and the storm itself was kind of over, and the storm surge just pushed in, and it came very quickly. So anyway, there's going to be a lot of shifting around, and builders buying land, and developers kind of making the city look even more different than it already does. So One of the other things I wanted to talk about in general was if you do decide to move to Florida in the future, which again, I think people will, I personally do not sell a ton of waterfront homes. I wish I did for the fact that they're usually expensive. But it's never really been my specialty because I have never had the desire to live on the water. I will give a shout out to my dad here. I grew up in Fort Myers, Florida. We did not move to Fort Myers with Florida beach dreams. Like we weren't beach people, we weren't boat people. We were there because my parents saw an opportunity to leave Ohio and to, create a life down in Florida. And I think when people think about Florida, they think about it in terms of the water and the sunshine and the beaches and because that's where they vacation. And I get that. It's beautiful, but I personally have never wanted to live on the water. I have always thought of waterfront living as being too risky for me. For me, home is safety. Home is a sanctuary. I don't really want any unnecessary risk. Now, if clients want to buy on the water and they understand the risk and they can afford the risk, then by all means, it's part of what we sell here and part of what I have sold. But a lot of the clients that I have that are coming down from, say New York or whatever, they're buying in the suburbs. And whenever we're talking about a storm like this, the suburban people for the most part aren't necessarily evacuating because they're inland. So take, for example, Land O'Lakes and Wesley Chapel. Wesley Chapel is not an evacuation zone. The houses that are being built there are being built to new construction code. The one thing about Wesley Chapel that is a little bit different than some other areas is they do not require hurricane shutters for the most part in Wesley Chapel. And that's determined. I'm not really sure who determines where you need hurricane shutters and where you don't, because you do need them in Odessa. I think it's a wind zone or something like that. But Wesley Chapel doesn't have hurricane shutters, but they have newer houses. They're not in evacuation zones. And you still get to enjoy the fact that you are close to beaches. Yes, you're 45 minutes to an hour away from beaches, but you're still close to them. And that to me is lovely Florida living as well. So it's not all live on water with boats and things like that. That is for the people that have either been here for a long time or for the people that are going to be able to afford it in the future. And more power to them. It's never been my dream. It's not really, what I'm trying to sell. I'm trying to sell, houses that people feel safe and secure in for the most part, because that's what's really important to me. So I will say I'm very grateful for my parents for making me a little bit more grounded in my Florida experience from the very get-go. But that's always been my philosophy with living, which is why I live in the part of South Tampa I live in, and why I encourage a lot of my clients to reconsider living in any area that would be a very dangerous flood zone if something like this were to come. And if they don't want to, then they can always, they will enjoy the risk and hopefully be okay from all of it. So hang on, I need it. I'll take water this time. I won't drink tequila. All right, I'll drink both just because that'll be more fun. I haven't eaten tonight either, so got stuck in a line. And yes, I do drink tequila out of a Waterford goblet. All right, we are getting an emergency alert. That is always buzzing all over the place. We get them all the time. We have not lost power or anything like that here. So, as at this point, we're just kind of waiting around. The storm has slowed down because it was supposed to be here like tonight, and it slowed down by almost 24 hours. So a lot of us, were preparing over the last couple of days, and we're kind of done. So people said, I don't know, I turned it off, Karen. She was asking me to read the alert. Of course, I turned it off because I didn't want it buzzing. So mandatory evacuation zones A and B, all mobile homes in Hillsborough. So that's been the alert for a long time now. We've had storm surge alerts, we've had hurricane watch alerts or warning alerts. Um, Evacuate by 7 a.m. Wednesday, 9 o'clock. Find your evacuation zones and storm shelters. I forgot what I was talking about. Oh, yes. So the storm slowed down. And so, we were ready, or I was ready as of like 10 o'clock this morning, and had kind of done everything. So I prepped some food. I baked some things, like anything that I could do while the power was still on. That's what I've been doing. And, checking in with people and, people have been checking in with me and everything else. So I was like, hey, let's do a live on YouTube so people can at least, uh, know what it's like. As far as what it's like right now, just everything's shut down. But today was just kind of a dreary day. There wasn't a ton of wind or anything like that. The storm is still really far out. So it was just kind of a normal dreary day out there. At this point, there's nothing to be concerned about. The slowdown of the storm is super helpful in the fact that it's given people more time to get ready. I think the Publixes are now shut down. The airport shut down at 9 this morning, which I think they would have had a lot more time to get people out. I wonder if they regret shutting down that early, but they have to plan for it. And then I'm sure they have a lot of prep that they have to do for the storm. So I guess that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, today has been, very anticlimactic weather-wise. Certainly not anticlimactic if you're watching the news and watching the storm form and move and things like that. It's very scary. I will say that this is probably the most scared I've been. Ian had me pretty nervous too. But this one feels different because of where it came from. It's so unusual for a storm to come off like that and then just go directly across. You'll hear rumors a lot about Tampa being protected by a Native American blessing. That is a rumor. However, we have no way to disprove it either. And the fact that we haven't had a direct hit, knock on wood, since in 100 years, a lot of people just like to tell that story. So if you hear that story running around online, it is just kind of an old wives' tale that we tell here in Tampa that we had a blessing put on this area and that we are protected from major storms. I am sure that is not true, but we have managed to be okay so far. So a few things, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them. I mean, I can sit here and talk forever, but in general, let's see what I have. I will keep everybody posted. Ronnie asked, staying put in Clearwater. Yeah, so I'm curious as to if you're still watching, what part of Clearwater are you in? Because Clearwater is definitely an area. I'm concerned about Pinellas County. I'm always concerned about Pinellas County. It's basically a peninsula on a peninsula. So if the bridges get messed up or anything like that, you're basically on an island there. You can go north and catch, the mainland in Pasco County and go around, but that's a really challenging thing to do, especially if everyone's trying to get off. So I do worry about Pinellas County. Being in Hillsborough County, you're on the mainland of Florida. You're not in Pinellas County. So I feel like, you're a little less on an island here, but I am also on the South Tampa Peninsula, which is also a peninsula in a peninsula next to a peninsula. See how many times I can say peninsula. Okay. Yes. So that's a great question. And, I don't know if I'm going to be able to give you a really good answer on that too. So how will it affect the housing market in Tampa Bay is the question. I think one of the things that I wanted to do last week before all of this started was I wanted to get and do a video with an agent in Fort Myers. So if anyone from Fort Myers is a real estate agent that went through the whole mess of Ian, please reach out to me. I'd love to do a live with you and talk about what it's done with the housing market there. I touched on a little bit, and what I think some of the immediate things will be is, and because what we've already seen in the last week from Helene is that everything, the needs of the people that live here are shifting. So you had people that owned houses that got damaged that are now need rentals. You have people that are going to be selling their lots. I think land is going to be less expensive than it has been for builders because there's just a lot more of it. People are going to be selling their land, especially if they don't have a high mortgage on it. So if they have had that land for 50 years and they have a flood insurance policy or homeowners insurance that's going to pay them a little bit, they can sell their land, then they can move on. Um, so I don't know if we know the difference or I don't know if we know exactly what's going to happen. Other than that, it is definitely going to take a while for a lot of that land to be rebuilt. And when it is rebuilt, I do expect it to be fairly expensive because it's just going to be expensive to build the type of houses that are going to need to be there. What I would love is for developers to come in and do development that is affordable for people in some of these areas, like Shore Acres, which notoriously has flooded always. So if that area was bought and redeveloped into something that was stronger and safer and higher for people to live there, but still somewhat affordable, that would be fantastic. As far as like big picture, I think none of this is good PR for Tampa. I mean, obviously, this being on everyone's radar and knowing the risk of it, people might just be like, oh, well, maybe there's another place that I'd want to move to. I also know that people have very short-term memories, and for the most part, every other day in Tampa, we're fine. And whenever you come to Florida and you live in Florida, being in hurricanes is an inherent risk that we're all dealing with every single year. A second June 1st starts until November 30th. It is hurricane season. As a resident of Florida, it is your responsibility to understand what that means and to be a helpful and capable citizen of the state whenever something happens. And to, if you're older or you can't do that, to know the resources or know who to ask for help. Because we all have to work together whenever this happens. So I do think that the housing market is going to shift because it has to. I don't know whether prices will go down a lot. I do feel like we will have more inventory because people will be like, yeah, I'm just going to pack up and move back up to, where I came from, or maybe I'm going to invest in a different state. That could very well happen. We had a lot of large corporations buy a lot of housing down here, and not all of that was super desirable housing. A lot of it was older homes that could possibly be damaged if there's a lot of wind or rain. And they might decide to just, start dumping properties. We will see. But either way, we will have to deal with whatever happens. And I wish I could predict the future. We were already seeing, a balance out of a lot of prices and even decreases in houses that either had a lot of houses for sale in the neighborhoods or had objectionable qualities about them. So, any house that hasn't been redone was, not something that people were willing to throw money at anymore, which they were at COVID because they just wanted a house. Now people are much more specific and picky about what they want in their house. So we are seeing houses like that linger more in the market just in general. So if we have more people put their house on the market, obviously that increases supply. If demand decreases, then prices should shift down. That is a problem for anyone who may be paid high and wants to sell, but for anyone who's staying, it is just, another wave that we have to ride out, because everything will hopefully fix itself and balance out in the future. So I have had a lot of clients call in the last week that were considering leaving and wanted me to check, the market conditions and things like that. I don't have answers at this point. If your house does very well, so I have a listing coming up in St. Pete that is in an X flood zone. It is very high. It's in the middle of the county, and it's a great little house. We haven't been able to list it yet because obviously all of this happened. I feel like there will be a huge market for that particular house if it does well and nothing happens to the house, windows or roof or anything like that. Then it really shows that there's that it did well, that there was no flooding, and people who need housing that have been displaced by Helene or from Milton will be able to buy a house that's in a safer spot. So I wish I could answer that. We are definitely going to keep up. Are you afraid of what the mayor said? If you don't evacuate, you will die. She was so blunt. Yeah, we saw that with Ian too. It's very jarring when somebody says that. We saw that with Ian too. I think they have to be blunt because they have to make sure people are taking it seriously. I will tell you, on the ground, people are taking this seriously. People are not being flippant about this. At no point were people. What's today? Tuesday? I have no idea what day it is. I would say by Sunday, everyone was taking it seriously. And most of the people that I know that evacuated yesterday. They put up their shutters, they evacuated. So that is for people that, just need somebody to scare them. Most people who I know who are here were very much heeding the warnings and getting out. They need people to leave the really dangerous places, especially the ones that were flooded during Helene. If we get the surge, if it goes to the north of us and we get the worst of the surge, then we're talking about like double the surge of what we had from Helene, and that was already record high. So you can die if you're in the surge and you are in an area where that happens. The surge is extremely dangerous. So yeah, not really scared by what she said, but I do believe it was for a certain population of people. Yeah. So Jamie asked, what percentage of Davis Island residents will rebuild or sell, being real estate prices expensive and risk very high? That's a great question. I can't wait to know the answer to that. At the risk of never selling a Davis Islands house again, which I don't sell very many of them, I just have never been a fan for the reasons that I was just talking about. Probably about 20 minutes ago, my feeling on housing in general, Davis Islands has always felt very risky to me. There's one bridge in and one bridge out. However, it's some of our most expensive real estate. That's where Derek Jeter's house was, where Tom Brady lived when he was here. We have lots that sell in there for millions and millions and millions of dollars just for the land. A lot of the ultra luxury houses, which would be like 10 million and up, are being built on Davis Islands. The reason it's always been so popular is because of its proximity to downtown. It's a beautiful neighborhood when you're on there, and it's a lovely day. It's a developed, community. It has a little downtown area there with some great restaurants and things like that. If there's a lot of houses on there that were built before the current construction code that makes you build things up. So for the people that are going to sell their lots, I do think there's going to be a decent amount of land available for builders to develop on, and those houses will be rebuilt, and they will be rebuilt to the new standard. And I think that's really, really important. I don't want anybody to lose their house or to lose the equity and the generational wealth that they have built from decades of living in a Davis Islands house. That might be like a 1960s house, but that is going to be the case when people have to sell their land. And if everybody's selling at the same time, that just makes sense that the values would be lower. Fire sales and things like that. I don't know if that's going to happen. I know everyone likes to talk about market crashes and everything. You need a lot of supply for that. And then obviously people are dealing with hurricane or with insurances and things like that. I do want to talk about insurance for a second. Hang on. Water, tequila. It's all about balance. So insurance. We, like a lot of the country, have had an insurance problem for a while now, Florida being one of the worst places for insurance premiums. And just in general, we've needed insurance reform for a long time. I did, it was probably like 2 years ago, I did a video with one of the former state senators who is very much an advocate for insurance reform here in Florida, Jeff Brandis. And we talked a lot about the lawsuits that take place in Florida. At the time, it was something like 80% of the insurance lawsuits that take place in the United States took place in Florida. They have done some things to regulate some of that. But in general, homeowners insurance in Florida is expensive for certain people, and flood insurance is very expensive. And I specifically want to talk about flood insurance here, because what a lot of people don't understand is whenever you're buying a house that requires flood insurance, the requirement that it's making you have, for the most part, if you're getting a loan, now this is only if you're getting a loan. If you don't have a loan in your house, you don't have to get flood insurance. You should, but you don't have to. So if they're requiring it, they require a FEMA policy, and that FEMA policy is for $250,000. So, and really the thought process there is, well, if you have flooding, then the $250,000, will hopefully cover whatever. Now, you still own the land too. So you have the land value as well. So say you got flooded for Helene, you get a full payout on your flood policy of $250,000. That's assuming you get a full payout. And then you sell your land for, say, $400,000. But you owe $900,000 because you bought it, in the peak. Then you have $150,000 that you can't pay off on your mortgage. So flood policies by nature are just not high enough to cover the value of most people's homes, even with the land. If you bought the house fairly recently, we had such a huge increase in prices that it doesn't cover. Now, if you bought it before COVID, so 2019 or whatever, your mortgage is probably low enough to cover if you sold the land and got flood insurance. And not be underwater. So, but there's got to be a decent amount of people out there that bought houses on the water for $1 million who only have $250,000 flood policies, and their land is not going to be worth enough for their mortgage to be paid off. I'm so worried about those people. I'm up at night worried about that. But the reason I'm getting into all of that is because flood insurance at $250,000 is not enough. And if I want insurance reform of all kinds, but I specifically want flood insurance reform. Think about all the people from Helene that lived in North Carolina and Asheville that had no flood insurance whatsoever, because why would they need it? I know there's rivers there. I don't know their flood plains or anything like that, but I assume there's a lot of people there that did not have flood insurance. And that was the biggest thing in Florida that happened with Helene. We didn't have wind and rain damage. We had flood damage. So we already have a hard time with homeowners insurance policies paying out what they're supposed to pay. So now you can't necessarily expect that they are going to pay things on your homeowners insurance policy if it was caused from flooding and not from normal hurricane wind rain damage. So that is a whole other thing that I would love to talk to an insurance person about and get the details on what's going on with that, because Helene was such a different type of storm that didn't cause typical hurricane damage. It was a flooding storm here in Florida and Tampa. Hi, it's my Aunt Pam. She lives in Fort Myers. So I am terribly worried about Fort Myers. If anything trends south, then the south end of Milton is where most of the surge will happen. So if the storm goes south of Tampa, then I'm worried about Venice and Port Charlotte and Fort Myers. They already just had such a hard time with Ian 2 years ago, and are starting to rebuild, and everything's moving. And now if this happens to them, I'm really worried about them. I have family down there, so I'm terrified. Yeah, you can't have insurance, but will you be paid the actual cost to fix everything, plus not having canceled policy by insurance company, high risk? Yeah. So just in general, insurance policies, I'll finish that conversation a little bit. Whenever you move to Florida or whenever you're buying a house, you will get, if you just get a normal insurance quote, there will have a replacement cost on there. And that is a computer generated cost. One thing to keep in mind is you can adjust those things. So I have, because I know so much about insurance, I have on certain homes that I have owned, adjusted my replacement value up, because the premium of adjusting it up doesn't really change it that much, or at least it didn't when the last time I did it. And it was worth it to me to make sure I had enough money in my insurance policy if, in fact, the cost of building went up, as they will whenever you have a bunch of people needing to rebuild. So my logic there was always, okay, well, if everyone's rebuilding and I want to rebuild, then I want to make sure I have enough money to rebuild. So the replacement cost didn't feel like enough. Now, the replacement cost is all you need to get your loan, but you can up it. You can also up your personal property costs. So that covers everything in your house. You can up that as well. You have to talk to your insurance agent about doing all of that. The criteria of getting homeowners insurance is the base of it is just to get enough to qualify for the loan. But that doesn't necessarily protect you in the way that you need to be protected. Now, with homeowners insurance, the older your house is, the more expensive it's going to be typically. Newer construction, it's one of the reasons I sell so much new construction, is because to me, that is such a huge benefit to newer construction, is lower homeowners insurance premiums. When you buy a house that's up to current construction code and or is out of a flood zone, obviously it helps keep those costs down. And with the insurance premium adjustments that we've had over the last couple of years, we have had people that for 40 years lived in Florida with manageable homeowners insurance costs, and now they're 10 times what they used to be. And if you're on a fixed income, you can't afford to pay that. So that's been happening for the last couple of years in general. And that's been really hard. So whenever we were talking about insurance reform before, we were talking about keeping premiums reasonable. Now, I'm worried about hurricane companies paying out the way that they should. And then one more thing, the flood insurance. If you are not in a flood zone, so if you are in a flood zone X, talk to your insurance company about, and you want flood insurance, which we should all have flood insurance in the state of Florida, and you want flood insurance, talk to your insurance company about supplemental flood insurance. So for example, because I am in a flood zone X where I live, I have a third party company, not FEMA, that I have a flood policy with. And it is for far more than $250,000 for exactly the reasons that I have explained in this live in general. One, I think housing should be a secure, safe investment, both in structure and financially. So I have always tried to protect my investment in location and insurance wise in case anything happens. And I advise my clients to do the same. But I was able to get a flood policy for more than double what the normal FEMA policy is, because I'm not in a flood zone. Now, you can do this not in a flood zone. If you are in a flood zone, it's just going to cost you a lot of money. So most people choose not to do it. But when you're not in a flood zone, it's not that much money. Now, that might change next year. So I will get back to you guys and let you know how much more that is. But for basically, I would say probably 150% of what the normal FEMA policy is. My premium for that flood insurance policy was just over $1,300 last year. That is completely worth it as far as I'm concerned, for the peace of mind of knowing that if it's just flood, that I have at least more money to cover a rebuild than I would if it was just a normal FEMA policy. So it might not be doable for you guys financially if you're moving to Florida, but it's something to keep in mind if you're in an X flood zone. I highly recommend it. I have a lot of insurance agents who would love to help with any of that. So homeowners insurance, flood insurance, always risky. I did see the 60 Minutes episode last Sunday about some of the homeowners insurance issues that were happening from Ian. It was a good story. It's a terrifying story, knowing what we're facing right now. All I can do is hope that the insurance companies are ethical and that our elected representatives require them to be so. Because from what that story was saying, there's a lot of things going on that are not terribly ethical. Cheers to insurance reform. If you're voting this year and you're in the state of Florida, I don't care who you vote for. All I want you to do is research how people vote for insurance and what their stance is on homeowners insurance. It is a huge deal, and it's one of the biggest things for us living here, like our normal everyday things that we deal with all the time. It is a huge reason for the affordability of housing to have gone down so much in the past couple of years. One, the rise of prices, and then also the affordability of insurance and things like that. Citizens Insurance, if you're not familiar with Florida, we do have a state-run insurance company called Citizens Insurance. That is for like an insurer of last resort, and that is paid through the state. And typically, historically, those insurance premiums have always been pretty reasonable, and they have definitely gone up. And Citizens also they had to take a bunch of people recently, and they have now started pushing people back into the insurance market, the regular insurance market, because they're required to do so. They just won't keep you forever if there are other insurance companies that will write you an insurance policy that's affordable. So a lot of people have been pushed back into the regular market. Whenever you come to Florida, it's hard. You don't recognize a lot of the insurance companies because they're not like your State Farms and things like that. I mean, there's State Farms down here, but it's not necessarily a State Farm policy. You get these random names, Olympus, Heritage, names that you're not necessarily familiar with on a national level. So it can feel a little scary whenever you're buying homeowners insurance because you don't really know, if it's a reputable company. So we do try to look at the ratings, and insurance companies have reinsurance policies. So it is a whole giant crazy thing that we are constantly dealing with. But homeowners insurance is obviously a big deal here. So let's see. What do we got? Thank you. Yeah, I do need some dinner. I promise I will eat. I promise. All right. Well, there's nothing else that I need to, someone just commented, about voting for the insurance industry. I don't know why it's not the only thing people talk about whenever they're running for office here. Again, I will never tell you who to vote for because I haven't even done all the research yet for the election in November. But it is if who you want to vote for is not talking about insurance, ask them because you need to know that we have to fix it in Florida. That being said, insurance is an issue all over the country. It's very obvious here in Florida. All right. So anyone who's in Tampa, please stay safe. If you need anything, like I said, I will be here, and I will update people as I can. And when I lose service, obviously I will stop. And if you're curious about the Instagram post that I put up a couple days ago, I've never had anything go viral so much in my entire life. It is up to, I don't even know. Let's see. It's up to 832,000 views. If you have a newer iPhone and you have updated it to iOS 18, if we lose cell service here, then we can hopefully connect to the satellite to text with people. So if we have no cell service here, the satellite on the newer iPhones is what we are relying on, and we will see. We'll see if it works. Hopefully we don't lose cell service. So keep an eye on everything. I am going to go eat dinner, I guess, since now I have a bit of a tequila buzz. And if anyone is a tequila person out there, I will tell you what my favorite tequila is, just in case you have not tried it. That is Don Fulano, Fulano, Añejo. It's fairly common around here in Florida, but if you don't have it up where you are, check it out. It's fairly affordable and I love it. So I am actually out of it. That was the end of my bottle. So I'm going to have to go through this hurricane without any. So if a liquor store is open, maybe I'll stop by one tomorrow because we're not getting the storm until a little bit later tomorrow. But anyway, now I'm babbling. Thank you all, everyone, for tuning in. I hope it was helpful. But I will see you guys all soon. Stay safe. And yeah, I'll keep posted. Bye.